Welcome everyone. My name is Joseph Lucier, and I have the great privilege to be interviewing the developer of the relaxator. The relaxator is a brilliant tool which helps us with our breath, and he's going to get into all of that information. His name is Anders Olssen, and he developed this as an evolution of his own journey through breathing and understanding and relaxation. He is the founder of Conscious Breathing website, which I recommend people to go to for information, research, science, and all these wonderful things. He is the author of the book Conscious Breathing, and he has an upcoming summit because his goal is to spread the word about breathing, and he's going to give us all he can about the information and mostly tell us about the practical uses of our breath, the management of our breath, and different things. So I'm going to hand it over right away. And please introduce yourself, tell us about your journey, your breathing journey and your life journey, and what brought you to here today.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph, for the nice introduction. So yeah, I've been doing this now for 13 years. 2009, I came across breathing and realized how important it was. And since then, I've been stuck with it because I noticed on myself what benefits I could get immediately. Almost I could feel how my racing mind started to slow down, and I realized that our breath is not just an automatic process that we never need to pay any attention to. It's actually a great tool to affect the processes in our body. We can all, if we think about it, realize that if I change my breathing, that will change all the other processes in my body. So if I start to breathe fast and high up in my chest, well, that breathing rhythm will affect my heart rhythm. It will affect my brain rhythms. It will affect my digestive rhythms. So it makes a lot of sense, right? Because our breathing is our number one bodily function. So whatever we do with our breath will affect our body. And as well as it is a tool to change the state, mental, emotionally, and physically, it is also what you say is a way to realize what's going on. You can notice in your breath, oh, that person is stressed, oh, that person is sad, or that person is angry, just by checking in on the breath. There are breath signatures for different states. And I think all of this, when I talk about it, most of it makes sense. But the thing is, we have never really thought about our breath. But just the mere fact that we breathe about 1,000 times an hour, and that if we stop breathing, we will die within just a few minutes. So we basically live from one breath to the next. So obviously, it has an effect how we move the air in and out of our lungs. So the typical person that have health challenges, they tend to be a little bit too much into the sympathetic state of the autonomic nervous system, a fight-flight state, and the breath will then reflect that. So that breath will be maybe through the mouth, fast and shallow, high up in the chest, or the person may stop breathing, holding the breath, or it may be noisy. All of these are characteristics of an activation breathing, a fight-flight breathing. And I tend to think of it not as right or wrong. It's just that, okay, sometimes we need to activate ourselves, and our breath will then go more in that direction. But the problem is, obviously, if we stay there for too long, for too often, and that is what I find. A lot of people that come to me, they have been stuck there. They've gotten stuck there, and they haven't realized that it has a huge impact. For example, on our sleep, whether we are breathing through our nose or through our mouth. So sorry, can I just finish here? Yeah. I teach is basically, if you want to get out of the activation state, which was my challenge, if you want to unlock the turbo, if you want to slow down, well, you just do the opposite. It's that simple. You go into the parasympathetic state by slowing down your breathing low, which it means you're using your diaphragm.
Right.
So instead of breathing high up in your chest, you're breathing lower. So low and slow and small and through your nose, and also rhythmically. If you breathe in a rhythmically way, compared to what many of us do, we have a tendency to hold our breath. If you breathe rhythmically, that will then affect all the other rhythms in a nice way.
Well,
and I call that safe and secure breathing, or relaxation breathing.
Okay, that's an excellent overview. And for the sake of our people that are listening, let's go into a little bit of the detail. Say, for example, first comparing nasal breathing and mouth breathing.
Yeah.
Because even when I did an explanation workshop to introduce this to people, they had no idea of really the differences, and even that there's an issue of mouth breathing as a problem.
No, we may think that, well, doesn't really matter, does it? It's either you take it in through the mouth or the nose. And actually the mouth, you can take in more oxygen. That should be better, shouldn't it? But it's not really how it works. Less is more, actually, in this case. We already have more than enough oxygen. We only use about 25% of the oxygen we take in when we're breathing at the normal breathing rate, which most people don't. They have a tendency to overbreathe, going into this activation breathing or stress breathing. But still, when we breathe in accordance with our body's need, we only use up about a quarter of the oxygen we inhale. The rest we will exhale. So there is really no point in taking in extra oxygen. And the nose, it has many important functions. In our body, we have body temperature, right? And usually the air we inhale it is not at body temperature. So the nose is heating up the air, and it's also moistens the air, because in the lungs we have 100%, they are 100% moisturized. Is that the right word?
Yep.
Yeah, but the air we inhale is normally not that moisturized. So the nose basically prepares the air for the lungs, just like we chew the food. We prepare the food for our stomach so that the stomach doesn't need to break down the food too much. So we help the food, or we prepare the food by cooking it, for example. So the nose is super important, and not only the warmth and humidification, it's also a great way to filter out virus, bacteria, and other particles in the air. Studies at Karolinska here in Sweden tell us that we inhale about 100 billion particles in a single day, and even more when it's like the season when the flowers come out and there are more pollen in the air, for example, or if you live in a city where there is a lot of pollution. So then you will inhale more particles, and then it's even more important to do nasal breathing, to trap these particles. Because if you compare them with mouth breathing, dry air, cold air, full of virus, bacteria, and other particles, which will then make the airways irritated and inflamed. And when something gets inflamed, it has a tendency to swollen, right? So our airways will be tighter, which means it's harder for the air to pass all the way down to the lower part of the lungs, which means that we force the mouth breathing forces the air higher up in the chest. So we then engage in that stress breathing, activation breathing.
So that's an important point that a lot of people need to understand. So two things. One is nasal breathing, which is something you said, which is fascinating, it's a preparation. It's kind of a preparation to give good quality air to our bodies, which is really good. And it's more efficient than our mouths.
Way more efficient, yeah.
Yeah. So
and if you look at, the thing we can touch and see and feel, that's actually the small part. We have like the size of a billiard ball inside our face. which tells us either the evolution has got it completely wrong, or the nose actually has some properties that are important, more than just smelling the flowers.
Yeah, so I think all of those different functions, and I think even there's a lot of blood flow to the nose at different times.
Yeah,
through
yeah.
These great processes.
And also in the nose, there is this substance produced called nitric oxide, which is antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal. So if you inhale through the mouth, you really don't spike the inhaled air with nitric oxide. That is produced in the nose. So with the nose breathing, there is also another part of the immune system. You can say nitric oxide is a part of the immune system. So mouth breathing, you basically bypass your body's first defense system.
That's interesting, and it's so unexpected that people would even be focused unless they do like traditional yoga exercises and different things like where they're focused on the breath and martial arts and different things like that.
Yeah.
But an important point that I'd like to get back to is, as you were mentioning before, is not necessarily that there's a good way and a bad way to kind of function. We have speed up, take care of things, slow down, rest, and relax.
Yeah.
And your device is called the relaxator. So
Yeah.
can you tell us more about how the relaxator itself can actually manage that stressful mode compared to the relaxation mode, parasympathetic and sympathetic modes of our bodies?
Yeah. If I'm exaggerating a little bit and do an inhale, that is tied more to the sympathetic part of the nervous system, right? We activate the body. Oh, there is something dangerous, and we inhale, right? So when you look at the pulse, for example, you see that when you inhale, the pulse goes up, and it's actually also the muscles are active. Your chest expands, your diaphragm moves down, and it's an activation compared to the exhale, which is the opposite. Now the danger is over. Now we can relax, and we sigh in relief. And when you measure the pulse, you will notice that on the exhale, the pulse goes down. You can actually measure it if you just check your pulse and notice on the inhale and exhale, and notice the difference. And also the muscles, they just collapse back to their resting position. So in a normal breath at rest, the out breath, there is no real actual muscle movement. So that tells us then that inhale is activation, exhale is relaxation. And the relaxator helps you to prolong the exhale. So you inhale through the nose, and then you have a resistance which you can set depending on who you are and depending on your breathing and maybe also the activity you are doing. So you set the resistance and inhale through the nose and out through the relaxator. And this slightly prolonging of the exhale means that you will slow down. You will find more inner peace. You will be able to take the elevator down from your head and into your body and getting more embodied. And a way to look at it is that you're able to connect your brain with your heart brain and your gut brain. And you do that with the breath, because if we are just living up in our head, we have more tunnel vision. We are more or less just able to repeat the things we have learned. But if you slow down, you will go from tunnel vision to a more wider perspective of what's going on, what's coming your way. And you will engage not only your brain, your mental capacity, but also your whole body. And then you will find maybe that you are not slave under your learned behavior, which to a large extent we learn in childhood, right? And they tend to control us, and even as adults, and the expression childhood trauma, adult drama, our nervous system is there to help us survive more than anything, right? Survive and divide. I think those are the fundamentals. First survive, and then we can divide. And if we're lucky, we can thrive sometimes as well. And obviously, then when we are growing up, our nervous system wants to keep us alive. And then depending on the environment we grow up in, we may install a lot of programs that helps us survive there and then. But as we grow up and we change environment, those programs may not be beneficial, and we don't realize, why do I react with anger or stress or worry in this and that situation? We don't realize that those are the survival programs we installed as kids, and we don't maybe want them because they are not beneficial to us as adults. We realize that we are not in that situation that we were in as kids, or for that matter later in life as well. But the majority of these programs, they get installed as kids. So just going from the tunnel vision to the wide angle and realize, hey, I have an opportunity to react differently. I'm not a slave under these reactions that I used to do, that I learned before, to react with fear and conflict and whatever it is that we are, whatever challenges we have. Wow. So that is really cool. It's almost like, my view is that it helps you, like if we do something often enough, we will establish new habits. And if we realize more and more often that we have the opportunity, the possibility to react differently, over time, that will then help us to upgrade these programs, these we have installed on our internal body hard drive.
I greatly appreciate that information, that perspective of what you've given, because I've been listening to a lot of your interviews to get to make sure I understand completely. But I think it's very important for people to understand something that you mentioned, is that deprogramming things, limiting notions of our childhood or society or even the media, but to understand that we have different options and we can have new habits and a greater awareness and expansion of our understanding even of the world by having that space, just by managing our breath.
Yeah. And to me, the key is, if you want to go from activation to relaxation, the key sits in, closing your mouth and prolonging the exhale. So I call a simple exercise that helped me a lot was the breathing anchor. You just anchor yourself by prolonging the exhalation slightly. And it's not about, it's not a competition. I think that is really important to emphasize. The lungs, they're really delicate tissues. So you just need to prolong your exhale slightly. And when you do, you will automatically slow down your breathing rate, right? And on the following inhale, you will activate automatically your diaphragm. So you just let the air in, and that will mean a lower breath. Because when you prolong the exhalation slightly, the diaphragm will move up slightly higher than normally when you exhale short. And that means on the following inhale, it will go down further. So the span of the diaphragm working will be bigger. So for me, that is just a simple exercise. Think of the breathing anchor, twice as long exhale as inhale, and you visualize an anchor sinking lower and lower and lower down into your body. And usually it could be enough with just 3 of those prolonged exhales. Whether you feel that, I'm going for an interview and I'm about to be stressed, a job interview, or I'm about to lose my temper and get angry with my kids, and I know how much I will regret it afterwards. I want to stop that. Or like one of my challenges was, I've been a fast eater. Okay, now I'm going to eat. I'm not going to solve the world's problem. I'm just going to focus on my food and be able to reset myself or ground myself, anchor myself. It was super helpful to just focus on that and implement this breathing anchor in my daily life.
think the first time that I remember I studied martial arts, and they
Yeah.
teach us to have a longer exhale and inhale to basically do that. But the way you just described it is if you have a longer exhale, the diaphragm and everything is giving more capacity, then your next breath, if I understand it correctly, can even be larger and increase your breathing. Is that a good way to explain that? Because that's a really good idea to understand with that anchor and the mechanism that's actually happening.
Yeah, except from I may would like to avoid using the word larger.
Okay.
It's more like the air is traveling lower down into your body, because a large breath means that we may upset the oxygen carbon dioxide balance. And that is where the misunderstanding is when people say, well, I take a big breath and then I get more oxygen, so that is really good. But that is not the case. My example to illustrate that is if you have a car and you're driving at a certain speed, and then you decide, let's give it 2 or 3 times as much fuel as it currently gets. The car won't go better, obviously, right? It needs exactly the amount of fuel that is needed for the speed it's going at and the gear that is used. There is no point. It's just as bad for the engine in the car to get too much fuel as it is to get too little. So your breathing should really reflect your activity. You have one breathing pattern when you're sitting in the sofa watching TV, and another if you're running a marathon, because then your metabolism, when you're more active, metabolism increases, meaning you consume more oxygen. So obviously then you need to breathe more. And in the metabolism, that is when oxygen and nutrients are converted into energy, which we call ATP, right? And the majority of that takes place in the mitochondria. And in that process, we also produce not only ATP, but also heat and water and carbon dioxide. So we are carbon dioxide factories, if you like. We take in oxygen, and in that process, then when oxygen is used, carbon dioxide is produced. So we exhale the excess carbon dioxide. So when we take a big breath in, we take in more oxygen, which we don't need. And then we will, on the following exhale, we will exhale more carbon dioxide. And that means then that we upset the oxygen carbon dioxide balance so that we have more oxygen and less carbon dioxide. And if we think that it's all about oxygen, and because that is what we have been taught, and that carbon dioxide is just a simple waste product, get rid of it as fast as possible, I'm here to tell you that that is not true. Because if we just take a step back and ask ourselves the question, what is it that makes us take the next breath? Well, lack of oxygen, everyone will say, but that is not true. It's the buildup, it's the excess carbon dioxide. We have in the breathing center in our brainstem, we have sensors for sensing the carbon dioxide level. So when they reach to a certain threshold, that will trigger an inhale, and on the following exhale, we will exhale the excess carbon dioxide. So if carbon dioxide controls the number one function in our body, it cannot just be a waste product, right? Yeah. And not only that it controls our breathing, it also has a relaxing and widening effect on smooth muscles. And smooth muscles, that is we have the heart muscles and the skeletal muscles that we can control by will. And the smooth muscles, they surround a lot of the parts in the body. For example, the airways, the blood vessels, the intestines, the stomach, uterus, and they will contract when we lower our carbon dioxide pressure, which means that we may get more narrow airways, which means that our blood vessels will get narrow, or the intestines will get narrow. And obviously we don't want that, because whenever there is friction, whenever there is stop of flow, we will have a problem. So we want to have an optimum carbon dioxide, an optimum balance between carbon dioxide and oxygen, in order for the flow of air to flow freely, the blood to flow freely, and the intestines to work optimum.
So, in general, relaxator and the process that you're talking about relaxes, but I think it's really good for people to understand that even down to the tissue and the cellular level, how profound it is. I think a lot for people with digestion issues, with constriction and tightness, heart, lungs, constriction or reduction or resistance is unhealthy. And then systemically, with the oxygen, especially the oxygen and carbon dioxide balancing, it can actually work in that way. Is that a good summary of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And if we think about it, when I say that the smooth muscles, they contract. So, for example, in asthma, we talk about bronchospasms. They go into spasms. They contract. They start to cramp. Or when we have blood vessels, then we call it angina pectoris, right? They go into cramp and they become narrow. And then we may get a medication containing nitroglycerin. And the reason why nitroglycerin works is because it stimulates the production of nitric oxide, the very thing that is produced in our nose, and that is antiviral, antibacterial, and antifungal, and makes the smooth muscles relax so that blood vessels and also the airways widen. And the same, so bronchospasm, cramp in the airways, and angina pectoris, cramp in the blood vessels, and we have stomach cramp, we have PMS problems, which may be cramp in the uterus. And the interesting thing is that the female cycle, when there is the ovulation, progesterone levels starts to increase, and progesterone has an effect on the breathing. So when studies shown when you give cats or men progesterone, they will increase their breathing, and that makes sense. After ovulation, the levels of progesterone increases because the metabolism increases in the woman, and then it makes sense to breathe more, right? But if you're just a little bit unbalanced, and then progesterone comes along and increases your breathing, that may then take you over the edge, and you will lower the CO2 pressure too much, and that could then lead to all kinds of PMS problems. They're really related to overbreathing, which is unknown knowledge and not discussed, actually.
I think one of the things that struck me when I first learned about, for example, the relaxator, and I've been familiar with the Frolov device, which is a similar device, but type. But the device, in terms of the profound, deep effects, healthy benefits, and I mean incredibly body health, even mind changing. In a simple approach by focusing to our source, as you mentioned before, on our breath, which is our most vital part of our existence. I mean, it just seems to be so simple, but so effective and so profound. It just blows me away.
Yeah. So I would say, I mean, I'm truly the carbon dioxide guy, and that was not how I started off. I'm been more and more convinced during this journey that is the key. So if we just take an example to illustrate this, if you have one person sitting in a deep meditative state, and then you have another person in a panic attack state, and then we try to figure out what is the main difference between those two states. And in my view, it's not sleep, it's not food, it's not whether you're recently got unemployed or if you're newly have fallen in love. The main difference is breathing and carbon dioxide specifically, because the person in a meditative state is breathing low and slow and rhythmically, meaning that more of the carbon dioxide is kept inside the body. So the carbon dioxide pressure is normalized, while the person in a panic attack state, if that person comes to a hospital, the breathing is not calm, right? It's shallow, fast, probably through the mouth. And that person will then get a bag to breathe in and out
Yeah.
through. And the reason why bag breathing works is because, as I said earlier, we are carbon dioxide factories. So the amount of carbon dioxide we exhale is about 100 times more than the amount we inhale. So when you exhale that into a bag, obviously, when you breathe in, you will rebreathe some of the carbon dioxide you just exhaled. So the stressed, panic brain is deprived of oxygen and blood. That's why it's so stressed, because you have lowered the carbon dioxide pressure, and that has put the blood vessels become more constricted. So when you then do bag breathing, the blood vessels will start to open up. So more blood, more oxygen will come to the brain, so the brain can calm down. That's it. It's super easy, and it makes so much sense, right? Otherwise, bag breathing wouldn't work. And if you ask people working in airlines, they will confirm this with you. Yeah. If we have someone that is really afraid of flying, we just take one of our bags we have and ask them to breathe in and out through it, and it always works.
It's interesting because when I was researching and trying to share this, I looked into the bag breathing and I said, what's going on there? But I said, if I understand it correctly, it's basically capturing more carbon dioxide, and then capturing a higher concentration is going to deliver the higher concentration of carbon dioxide into the body, which you get through the relaxator and through the rhythmic breathing and all these other things. Is that a good summary of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. and I mean, one of the experience I did early on on my breathing journey was when I figured I had already started doing physical activity with closed mouth and felt the benefits. And I figured at that time I was much more competitive. I am still today, but that was more where I came from.
Okay.
Life was always a competition, sort of. So I figured, okay, I want to take it to the next level.
Everything is connected. So please, I apologize.
Yeah. So I figured I want to take it to the next level. I had already noticed how nasal breathing during physical activity made me grounded and calm. So what I did was I went out for a jog about an hour, and I only did nasal breathing, but this time I tried to take as many steps as possible on the exhale as on the inhale. So I took 2 to 3 steps on the inhale and 5, 6, 7, 8 steps on the exhale. And it was like every step I felt almost out of breath, like breathless, because I was building up so much CO2, stimulating my breathing center to take the next breath. But I'm a bit stubborn, so I was able to keep it in for the whole full hour. And it was quite tough. But when I came home, that was when the reward came. And that was when it really hit home how CO2 is really our natural tranquilizer. If we want to slow down, calm down, we should use that realization and work with our body, not against it. We don't necessarily need things from the outside. We produce it already in our body. So when I came home, I sat down at the kitchen table, and 3 hours later, I was still sitting there, just, admiring the world, or just feeling that I was in a blissful state.
Wow, in a way, you were very efficient, and then you were basically forcing a greater efficiency in your body, even though it was challenging, and then you're still in that state. That's a great story, and I think people should understand. And one of the things that I mentioned to people is, I would say one of the greatest assets of this is this part, because it's so easy to use, and if you put it like I do, I have it here, it's like, oh, no excuse, just do it. What would be a good regimen daily for people to use the relaxator, and what would be a good process, like your 28-day process that you have?
Yeah, I recommend 15 minutes per day, but it's better to do 5 minutes than nothing at all, obviously. And at the same time, people use it more than that. But just to get an effect, I think 15 minutes is a great. Everyone can do that because you can really use it in a lot of situations, in the car, in when you're cooking, in front of the TV, when you're cleaning the house, when scrolling social media or whatever you do. So it's not that you have to just sit there and breathe in the relaxator. You can do other things while using it. And but at the same time, some people use it more. So when I was sick a couple of months ago, I had the flu, so I had a fever and I had cough and a runny nose. Although I could still breathe through my nose, and that has been actually the case for the last 13 years, even though I've had a cold now and then, never to the point where I have been forced to giving up nasal breathing. So that's interesting. I think it follows if you don't use it, you lose it. So since I'm using my nose all the time, it doesn't get stuffy. But at that time when I was sick and I was coughing and had a runny nose, I put it in my mouth and my cough just stopped there and then.
Oh.
And the runny nose as well. So that day I used it for 12 hours. Maybe that's a little bit too much, but that's me. And I can also use it, not that to the point where I misuse it, but sometimes for all of us, we have deadlines, right? We have things, I really have to fix this. And then this is a fantastic tool. So last week, preparing to send out a newsletter for the summit, and I really wanted to get it going prior to a podcast being launched where I was interviewed. So one night I worked to 3:30 in the morning, and another night I worked to 5 a.m. in the morning. And I had extreme help of the relaxator. It really, really helps me to stay focused. But I don't recommend, because you can become addicted to it, almost like you overuse it. You instead of changing your habits so that you get rid of many of those deadlines that a lot of us have, I think because we are, at the end of the day, we are adrenaline junkies. And I say that because that's where I come from. And I have realized that more and more, how we actually probably, again, if we go back to these installed programs on our internal hard drive, at least I had installed programs saying that, yeah, I need certain amount of adrenaline each day, and then it's up to you to fix it. And that means that we create all kinds of scenarios that will give us that adrenaline, because then if that's a core program, our body will make sure it gets that. So when I have started to change things in my life, change habits, change attitude, and then these programs have become updated, and I don't run on adrenaline as much as I used to. But I think in general, our society is quite adrenaline driven. And we don't understand it. We don't realize that we create those situations where, oh yeah, it's so much to do now. I have all these deadlines. But over time, if you look at it, maybe there and then, well, you can say, well, I'm a victim of the circumstances. There were not much to do. But over time, over a 5 or 10 years perspective, you would see that you as individual, or we as society, we tend to create that. We shouldn't necessarily need to live like we were still on the African savannah, being chased by a tiger and engaging in our sympathetic part of our nervous system. We should be able to upgrade our reactions and actually stay more in the safe and secure state, and where you have more of the harmony and thriving without feeling that life is a struggle and then we die.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is, even the name of your website, conscious breathing. I mean, we can transcend those habits and those different things and create new ones with a greater expansion and awareness.
Yeah.
On a related topic to the breathing, very specific question, based upon my medical experience and practice,
Mm.
but also a question about breathing. As I was researching some naturopathic medicine from Europe from about 100 years ago, one of the things they said, which I thought was quite profound, and I wanted to get your impact, your opinion on how it affects, again, systemic body improvements and even expanding our awareness. They mentioned the fact that every breath we take impacts moving our tailbone, and the relationship between our tailbone and, say, something like the craniosacral fluid,
Mm-hmm.
which is another major component of nourishment, which is, really not focused on. But our breath, the rhythm, there is a rhythm of our craniosacral fluid. There is a rhythm to our breath. And when I heard that every breath moves or impacts the tailbone, and the tailbone is kind of like that circuit of craniosacral fluid.
Yeah.
Do you have any opinions on that, on that anatomy?
I have taken a few courses in craniosacral therapy, and
Okay.
so yeah, there seems to be a relationship between the breath and this rhythm. So the breathing rhythm, as again we discussed earlier, affects. I mean, in my view, but of course I'm a bit biased here. We should remember that, right? But in my view, the breathing rhythm sets the stage for the other rhythms.
Okay.
It really does, and so it is possible, yeah, that there is a close relationship between the breathing rhythm and the craniosacral rhythm. I haven't seen many studies of that, though. I have talked, though, to people that work as therapists, working with that, and confirm that, yeah, there is this relationship. Yeah.
I think the key for everyone to understand is what you said, is the breath is kind of like setting the tone for so many things systemically in the body. And then when the body comes back into that harmony and that rhythm, such as, rhythmic breathing, longer exhales, and a proper balance of carbon dioxide and oxygen, that can create what I would think is really a great opportunity for homeostasis and healing. That's my understanding of it.
Yeah. And one thing, we more and more people start to understand the importance of the nose and understanding the importance of the diaphragm. So the low and slow nasal breathing. What I feel that hasn't got the recognition it deserves is the rhythmic breathing.
Okay.
Because there seems to be so many people that have a tendency to hold their breath over and over and over again. Whenever we concentrate, we engage in something, we focus on something, we get stuck. And that is when we sleep and we have that issue, when we stop breathing, we call that sleep apnea, right?
Yes.
And that is a serious medical condition that if it's untreated, it would probably take many years of your life. And at daytime, I call it stress apnea or computer apnea or text message apnea, or basically whatever you want apnea, whatever we engage in. So I mean, I've been doing this for 13 years, as I said, and say maybe 5 years ago, I had been working with conscious breathing for many years, right? So I just ran this test on myself. I decided to do a solitaire, which was on time, and do it 100 times. And every time before I started, I was thinking, okay, I should focus on my breathing. I should breathe low, slow, rhythmically, everything the body wants, so I can keep my focus and attention without consuming too much efforts. But it followed the same pattern every time. I was able to manage that for maybe 5 and 10 seconds. And then the task kicked in and the competition, because it was timed, right? So at least for me, that is a flag. Okay, now I need to perform here, and then everything else. So I forgot about breathing totally. And then when I started to feel, oh, right, I'm about to solve it now, this task, I just have 2 or 3 cards left and then I'm done. Then, oh yeah, my breathing, I was able to go back to my breathing and check in on it. And then always it was the same. My breathing was horrible,
Oh,
either fast or shallow, or quite common, I was holding my breath.
wow. That's a great experience.
Yeah, so then I just decided to, okay, let's see what happens if I do it. I do 6 times with the experience I had just learned, and then I do another 6 times, but using the relaxator. And then
Oh, great.
I measured my heart rate variability, and it was actually a huge difference.
Wow.
With the relaxator, I think I was at 100% every time. Really, like, I don't know if you have seen the heart rate variability, how that you have like a nice curve going up if you have great heart rate variability. If you're not, then it's very much up and down. Yeah, anyway, it was exactly how I felt. I felt more stressed and more, like we are when we try to perform and think that we need the sympathetic turbo in order to complete that task. So I'm here to say that, yeah, it's good to have, but you can postpone the time when you need to use your turbo. You can really go a lot longer than you may think, including when you do physical activity, that you can go quite far if you just train your nose. The main thing is that it's a mental attitude. You don't think you're able to breathe through your nose while doing physical activity, but that's because you compare it with the forceful breathing, fast breathing, big breaths that a lot of people take when we do physical activity. But what we do with nasal breathing is that we replace quantity with quality.
Yes, yes.
Obviously, you can't breathe that forcefully through the nose because the nose is more narrow. But since the nose is much more efficient, it warms and humidifies the air and cleans it of bacteria and particles, the airways will stay open. And because you spike it with nitric oxide, which helps make the airways open, and you keep a better carbon dioxide pressure in your body, which also helps you keep your airways open, you will direct the air all the way down into the lower part of the lungs where you have most of your alveoli. That is where the action is, because the majority of the part is just like a snorkel. It's called the dead space in medical terms. So if you're breathing more shallowly, that means that the air you take in, it doesn't reach the alveoli, because most of the alveoli are at the lower part of the lungs, right? Yes. So obviously then you are just moving the majority of the air you take in this snorkel, and then you breathe it out again. So obviously then you need to compensate. Like if you're driving your car and having one foot on the brake, well, you need to compensate and push harder on the gas pedal. So that's what we do. We breathe faster. And that's not very efficient. Hey, why don't you take your foot off the brake? I promise you, it will be much easier. So yeah, the rhythmic breathing, that was where I started off. Yeah, that is super important. So if we just think about, we go out for a walk, and we do it in an unrhythmic fashion, or we jog or run, and we start and then we stop and then we start. It's horrible, right? We can't imagine such a walk being a nice thing. And that's what we do when we stop breathing all the time, like so many of us do. That's not very, very, I mean, for example, our brain wants to predict what's going to happen. That's the main thing. And the main thing our brain wants is oxygen. So if we give our brain oxygen and we ask, okay, you got oxygen now, what do you want next? Oxygen. Okay. Well, you got some more oxygen. What do you want now? I want more oxygen. That is what the brain wants always. And then sometimes it wants some nutrients and some sleep and some love. But the majority of the time, it's all about oxygen. That's why we live from one breath to the next. So obviously, when we focus on things and hold our breath, we deprive the brain of oxygen, and the brain will be more stressed. So when we're sitting there reading a book or trying to complete a task, and we hold our breath, then our brain will get stressed. And then when it tells us, hey, we need a fruit, we need coffee, we need a chocolate bar, we need to go to the toilet, we need to whatever, that we get distracted. So that's why I think I love to use the relaxator so much when I work under pressure, when I have these deadlines, because it will then ensure this rhythmic breathing, which will ensure a steady supply of oxygen to the brain. So the brain will be able to concentrate and go on for longer. And I have a great example of this. There was this school with 25 kids. I think they were 10 and 11. And they did the 28-day program. So they used the relaxator. They got, every now and then, they got some information about the importance of breathing, nasal breathing, and how to use the relaxator, etc. And at the end of the 28th day, I interviewed a lot of the kids, and they had really profound stories to tell. And also the teacher said, yeah, this class, even before we started with this breathing retraining, they were really calm. But what I've noticed is that they are now even much more calm. They don't need to go to the toilet as often. They don't need to disturb their pal because they're sitting there with a tricky math task. So I think that is a testimonial to the fact that the brain don't need to have all these breaks if it gets what it needs, which is oxygen and nutrients.
I think it's just so profound. The story with the children is excellent because you think a lot of times those children are medicated and different things, as opposed to where they can just physically balance out their own bodies. And
Yeah.
in relationship to breathing and stuff like that, I mentioned to people about the tape, the mouth tape at night.
Yeah, the sleep tape. Yeah.
The sleep tape, because people get like, oh, I gotta breathe at night. So can you tell us about the sleep tape? Because it's in many ways forcing us for nasal breathing while we're asleep, and it's gonna, again, proactively manage the process we've been talking about all, for the last hour.
Yeah.
And how does it work for covering your mouth? What's that all about?
Yeah. So a common reaction is that, oh my God, I will die. I can't manage this. And then my reply is always, well, then you probably need it. But you just take the tape and put it over your mouth, either vertically, or you may tear it apart and tape from your nose down towards your chin. And that some people feel that to be less intrusive, and they feel that they can cheat, so they can breathe on the side of the tape, because when you tape from your mouth downwards, you don't cover the whole mouth. So it's not necessary to cover the whole mouth. But I mean, sleep is so important for us, really, really. And we have a tendency, I think, in today's society to deprive ourselves of sleep. Yes. It's almost considered a superpower when someone says, yeah, I only need 5 hours of sleep. Wow, how do you do that? I also want that, because we want to squeeze in more and more and more activities into our life. And if we just ask ourselves the question, do I wake up to the alarm clock? If I do, that means that I'm actually dragging my body, which is not fully rested, out of bed just because I say so. So if you wake up to the alarm, my suggestion is go to bed earlier. I'm not saying you shouldn't set the alarm, because that could get you in trouble, but at least if you go to bed earlier and prioritize your sleep, you will be able to wake up maybe before the alarm. And so the tape, it's really to ensure nasal breathing while asleep, because we can all agree that when we are asleep, we definitely want to be in the parasympathetic. We want to be safe and secure, and that is where healing and repair takes place, right? And mouth breathing at rest automatically means that we are more geared towards sympathetic fight and flight state, and that is something we definitely want to avoid when we sleep. So it's not only about the hours we sleep, of course, it's also about the quality. So just to illustrate this and to give a voice and an understanding to people that suffer from all kind of health issues and haven't realized that maybe the core of their health problems is breathing. I participated in a study at Stanford University where we blocked our nose for 10 days and 10 nights. So 24/7, our nose was blocked, so we could only do nasal breathing. And we did tons of studies, everything from measuring our levels of adrenaline to dopamine to having a probe almost into our brain, it felt like, to scanning our brain, to doing what you call it when you do the PEF tests, different types of lung function tests. Everything from that at Stanford to standing on one leg, to checking our eyesight, to doing push-ups and measuring our heart rate variability, to measuring nitric oxide and carbon dioxide, all kinds of things. And we wanted to see, would it, if we do just mouth breathing, would that affect our health? And that was really what happened. We felt totally miserable. After these 10 days, we were just exhausted. The main thing that was affected was sleep.
Wow.
So I went from no snoring to 3 hours of snoring per night.
Whoa.
Telling us what I talked about before, right? That mouth breathing makes the airways irritated. And when they get irritated, they get inflamed and then they get more narrow. And snoring is basically narrow airways, right? It's when they get too close together, this snoring sound occurs. And I woke up 5-6 times every night. I had a dry mouth. I had to go to the toilet 2, 3, 4 times every night.
Wow.
And we didn't only record the sound, we also filmed ourselves, and you could see how we were twisting and turning. And at the end of these 10 days, I didn't even want to go to sleep because I knew it's going to be a horrible experience. And other things was that it felt like I was almost doing a time journey back into my previous life when I was more stressed out, when I found it hard to relax and wind down. I noticed that more and more how my body was compensating. When we checked there at Stanford, the adrenaline levels, I think they were up 300%.
Oh.
So I was much more stressed, which we saw in these levels, and the dopamine levels, they were up 600%, I think. And dopamine is our reward system, right? And that was also spot on, because we also had many subjective, we rated from 1 to 10 energy and happiness and all kinds of things, including sugar cravings. So I started measuring that already 4 days prior to we started with the blocked nose. And I was just from a scale from 1 to 10, I was at 1. So no sugar cravings at all. And that lasted a couple of days into the study, but then it started to increase. In the last 4 days, I had 7 to 8 in sugar cravings.
That's crazy, man.
That's crazy. And that was all too familiar with, for me, because when I was more stressed out, I could really get these sugar cravings that I was almost ready to fight with my life over it. And that was a little bit how I felt. Like the last 4 days, I ate chocolate and ice cream every day. And the last 2 days, it was pizza and beer. And I don't eat those things much, actually. So it was quite profound, this difference. It was almost like, you don't take that pizza or that ice cream from me. That's mine. Like, again, I was really willing to fight for it. And I'm 100% certain if I would have continued, it would have been all of these 4: ice cream, chocolate, pizza, and beer every single day. That was super obvious. Yeah, really interesting. And then when finally we could just,
The good news.
Yeah.
The good news. Let's hear the good news.
Yeah, exactly. The good news. Yeah. So when we could finally get that shit out of our nose and start to take nasal breath, we got our health back. So the next morning I woke up, then we taped our mouth instead of having the blocked nose. So I did only nasal breathing. I can still remember that feeling. I had slept like a baby, and my energy was probably at least 11 from 1 to 10. And honestly, I couldn't stop singing. I couldn't stop smiling. I was just so happy.
That's great.
And yeah, and also we felt stupid. I mean, where I lived, I stayed there for quite some time, 4 weeks, and it was 100 meters to a park. And one day I found myself lost. I didn't know how to get home. So I had to ask at least 2 people, I think. I mean, 100 meters, that is just 1 block away, right?
Yeah.
But my interpretation is because my brain was running on adrenaline, and my brain was deprived of oxygen, and then you can't really think logically. I was more stressed, and when we're stressed, or when we are afraid, or when we are, then we really, our ability to think is not that good.
That's amazing. I think people have to understand this was not years. This was a 10-day process that totally reversed and then reversed back.
It reversed back, yes.
That's amazing. That's just so incredible.
Yes, so the idea, it was not like doing a jackass movie or something like that. The idea was just to see, can it have such a profound effect, and show it to people, and actually make them realize, and maybe inspire them and get them motivated. Right, I have my asthma, or I have my sleep problems, but there is something I can do that doesn't have to cost me almost anything. I already have a superpower, which is my breath. If I just use it in a different way, if I change the way I move the air in and out of the lungs, I can benefit hugely. So that was the theory, the thesis we wanted to test with the study. Another thing which is really interesting was the balance. So we stood on one leg and just closed our eyes, and then we noted how many times do I need to put down my foot during this 1 minute. So with mouth breathing, we did 1 on the left leg and then 1 on the right leg. So in total, it was 2 minutes per day. So 20 minutes in total. And during those 20 minutes with mouth breathing, I had to put down my foot 120 times.
Okay.
And with nasal breathing, I only needed to put it down 20 times. So it was, again, a huge difference. And balance is really an indicator of our health, right? When you see older, elderly people that have poor balance, that's really an indicator of how good or how bad their health is.
That's amazing. I mean, to get such profound results without medications and with different things, but really cueing into the core superpower that we have, which is breathing, and then to manage it proactively as a tool. I mean, since I first learned about this, I mean, I'm always, even on other things, I'm wearing it so people can ask me questions about it. And then I think it's really important. I don't think people understand the seriousness of the profound benefits that you can get by doing what you're talking about.
No, and maybe even more profound is the fact that when we went there after the 10 days, we went to Stanford, spent a whole day there, and we felt completely exhausted and drained. And we mostly hear, it's fine, it's okay, it's within the range. All the tests we do in the hospitals, and we may put too much faith in them and think that they are really able to tell us whether we are healthy or not. But just the fact that when it comes to breathing, they are not able to capture that with those tests, maybe in a good way. And honestly, the golden standard when you come to the hospital, it's to count your breaths manually. You have all these fancy devices and all of that. And then when it comes to your most important function, you just check manually and you write it down on a piece of paper. And maybe, I don't know, but maybe it is forgotten. Yeah. So, yeah. So there is a lot to do. And I mean, the reason why conscious breathing exists, why I continue doing this, is obviously because people need the information. They don't get the information from their doctor, for example. So I have this standard question when I'm out lecturing, and there are thousands of people that have answered. And recently I lectured for 100 people with sleep apnea. And I asked, have your doctor ever asked you, or have you ever discussed about your breathing with your doctor? And it's always the same. One person in this audience said yes. And the other one, they say no, and they get irritated because why haven't I been asked about this?
Oh.
And I mean, if you think about it, these 100 people, and they were on average, I would say maybe, 60 plus, and some were 70 plus, and probably as a group, because you don't only have sleep apnea, right? You have other health issues as well. There were overweight and diabetes, and as a group, probably these 100 people, they represent thousands of doctor visits, right? And not a single time, well, except for one person.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's unacceptable in many ways to
I mean, I'm not here to mock healthcare or anything like that. I'm just telling you guys, work as a doctors and nurses, you have some room for improvement here. Yeah.
I think as always, we understand and forgive them because of their limited focus and scope.
Yeah.
This is out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, it is in a way, but at the same time, we can't neglect the fact that it's the body's most vital function, right? And I think we as patients, we have a responsibility as well, right? And we should understand that the band-aid solution that more and more people are getting, and understanding that, okay, I have a headache and I get a pill, but actually it's not because I don't get a pill that I get a headache. It's just a band-aid solution. So if I want to deal with the root cause, then maybe the hospitals and the doctors and the nurses don't have so many tools there. And I should, in my view, I should consider myself to be a customer. And if I go into a clothes store and they don't have the clothes I want, I just walk out of there and go into the next store, right? Yes. So if we can have more of that mindset, not putting the doctor on a pedestal and think they have all the answers under the sun, but just take their opinion for what it is, and then think, is this something for me? And if not, if I'm more interested in finding the root cause to my problem, then I may go elsewhere.
I think for the people that are going to be watching this interview, I think they need to understand one is really important. Do your homework, ask questions, and really take charge of your own life. And like I say, go to another dress store or clothing store. If you don't get what you like, if somebody isn't really versed, because there's a lot of information out there. But number two is one of the things with the relaxator, it is a doable process and a doable tool that everyone can do to really have an incredibly profound and incredibly healing process. I know even from sleep deprivation perspective, that can create heart problems and it can create lots of different side effects. Yeah. And so you would work on the breath and different things, and then the deeper breathing to manage asthma more effectively is quite profound. So with that said, I think two things. Number one, thank you so much for all this incredibly important, people need to understand, incredibly important and doable things they can do to change their life significantly. And the last important question that I'd like to ask you in terms of your vision, and of course, I think this has possibly even exceeded your expectations on how great it's been. But what would you say for all the people that are listening right now in terms of the future and your vision and your goals on all levels? Because I've listened to you speak in terms of the expansion of even awareness of how you think your process, your relaxator and the breath tape can, in many ways, change the world.
Yeah, change the world. It's interesting when you use that word, because at the end of the day, I see conscious breathing, even though we mainly market it as a health project, change your breathing habits and change your health, or a performance project where you can get better endurance during physical activity or perform better at work. But at the end of the day, I think more than anything, it's a peace project, because if you find the peace within, that will radiate in your actions and your communication. And war starts on an individual level, and peace also starts on an individual level. So that's what I envision, that we will be able to be kinder and gentler and take care of ourselves and others better, including animals and plants, so that we live in symbiosis with the planet, not as a virus. And I envision that what I want to inspire people is to get a personal health vision.
Yes.
Like mine is, I want to live long and die healthy, and do everything I can to avoid pills and syringes and surgery or other tools that the hospitals help us with. There is no guarantee, of course, that I will be able to achieve that, but that is my vision. And I think a vision is very strong, and we tend to have dreams for our vacation or our career at work, but when it comes to our health, I think that is lacking. And I think not only a personal health vision, but we should also have natural health visions or corporate health visions. Like here in Sweden, we have the traffic department. They have a zero vision. We are only 10 million people here. So the zero vision is that we should have zero dead or seriously injured in traffic.
Wow.
And everyone working at the traffic department knows about this vision, but not only them, the whole country knows about that. Yeah. And then you may ask, why in the world don't we have a health vision in this country? Why don't have a health vision? We should be the world's healthiest country. I guess the reason for that is because you have these powerful people selling these band-aid solutions that stops that. But that is what I want to inspire. We should have both a personal health vision and a natural health vision. And why not, as a company, being very bold and getting out there saying we should be the healthiest company in the state, or we should have the healthiest school in this community, or whatever. Then, because when you start with the vision, you don't know how should we achieve that, and what should we do, and what to measure. Those things will come second, right? If you start with the vision, then people will start to get creative, and all kinds of things will show up. Probably you will not end up saying we need more SSRI, or we need more doctors, or we need more hospitals. Probably you will end up with creative ideas like, how can we do in our little community to inspire people to go out for a short walk every day, or things like that, right?
I think I share your vision 1,000,000%, and then I really appreciate sharing that. I mean, we want to change the world, change ourselves, one village at a time. But I think people do need to understand, put it in your mind about a vision, and in many ways it will create a positive energy, and it will happen in many ways. So it's very positive and optimistic. And I'd just like to say again, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to share this with as many people as possible. Everybody I know will be walking around with one of these very short. I'm getting them as gifts, everything. But on a serious level, people need to understand this is a core idea of the manifestation of our health, and even our consciousness. As you said, your website is consciousbreathing.com, which means it's about a way of thinking, doing, and living, and even on the grand scale, as you mentioned. So
because the side effect will be that you increase your consciousness.
Oh my goodness, a side effect which will increase your consciousness. I guess that's really a good, good way, thing to understand. Everybody listen to that and understand that, and then be empowered by taking charge of your life and being healthy in such a profound, simple, but amazing way. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for this interview. It's been a great opportunity, and I'm so blessed and appreciate the opportunity to listen to what you have to say. So thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Joe, for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. So you have a great day back there, and the world will greatly benefit from everything that you said today. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
You take care now.
You too.